Hi everyone, my name is Olga, and I'm quality something. I mean, look at the testing and all the titles you usually get when you're a tester. We started as testers, and then we're QA, QC, test engineer, software developer and test, all the things, right? And it means nothing. I used to be the one who sends seal of approval to my team too. Yes, I've been in testing for 10 years now. So I tried different things, and this is going to be a story how I became quality evangelist and why I don't like testing. Okay, story is not only about this. It's a story about how I started, believe that good teams don't need a tester. It's a story of how teams can deliver quality without tester, and how to find those edge cases that you don't know how to find because you're a developer, not a tester. I'm usually a very unlucky person. So, well, everything breaks around me, right? My first presentation at Triathlon, I fell off chair. So I won't be surprised if I fell now, so please be kind if I do. But one time I was really, really lucky. I joined an amazing team. It was 6 years ago, actually 5 years, 11 months, and 2 days ago. And yeah, there's many aspects why this team was awesome and why I think it was the best team I worked so far. Team had no prejudices about testing, mostly because developers I worked with were very young in terms of working with teams. They were good developers who developed for many years as a developer who developed apps for themselves, or just one developer on a project, never worked with the team. So they didn't have any kind of prejudices how tests are supposed to work, how development is supposed to work, how agile teams are supposed to work. We had great infrastructure in the company. We had perfect CI/CD pipelines, everything was running fast. We had built in all the test automation into pipelines. Everything was perfect from technical perspective on that level. Because I joined during the summer, and you all know nothing happens in Sweden during the summer, I had 2 months to learn about the product. Before I even chose the team to join, I could learn about the whole product, industry of the company, how user behavior works for this particular industry. I read studies, how people actually behave in this particular area. It was a gambling company, so there were a lot of studies based on that. I had access to market behavior because information was really, really open in the company. And I had freedom. I had freedom to choose team I'm going to work with. I had freedom to choose technology I'm going to work with. I had freedom to choose what I'm going to do in my team. There was zero expectation how I was supposed to be working. This setup is important. That's why I'm spending so much time on it. It's important because it affected how I work. And it's important because I was lucky to be there because it changed how I think. So after a couple of months, learning about the product and everything, we finally actually get to work. Started in August, everyone came back from vacation, we actually started doing some things. So, how do you think, how much time it take me to find a bug after 2 months in a company when I get it built? Yeah. 2 months. Yeah, well, first bug way faster, but
2 hours.
2 hours. Okay. Any other bets?
5 minutes.
Actually, 5 minutes was closest to average at 2 months point. But 5 seconds also was a good guess, because that's exactly what tripped me into thinking that I'm doing something wrong. If I can find a bug under 5 minutes, what does it mean? It means I knew exactly where to look for this bug. I knew, and I looked there. So I knew where the bug is. Okay, and I don't have text here. Awesome. There's supposed to be text. Oh, here we go. Yes, I'm a good tester when I find a bug that fast, but I'm a very bad team player. I knew where the bug was going to be. I knew how to find it. It took me just 5 minutes, but I waited until it was developed. Of course, I get my confirmation as a tester when I find a bug, right? Yes, I find a bug, I did something good. But in this case, I'm a bad team player. So what to do? I don't want to be a bad team player. I want to be a good team player. I love my team. So yes, I have to tell them how I do it. But to tell them how I find a bug, I need to understand how I actually look for the bugs. So I started to analyze what I'm doing and how I behave differently compared to developers when I'm looking for bugs. So if we set aside all the sciences, cognitive science, and different type of behavior and everything, what it boils down? How do I test? I use different environments. First thing I did when I found a bug, I took my phone. Why? Because as a developer, you most likely sit in front of your computer. You're looking at the back screen. So when I get a build, I immediately open this on my phone. And have you tried to open schedule for Knowabunga on your phone? Yeah. That's how I find a bug in the first place. Different environment. And sometimes it's just a phone or tablet or wherever. Sometimes it's just different browser. Sometimes it's different machine. Just different environment, not the environment it was developed on. Another way to interact with product. I always try to do differently. Yeah. Now it works, right? Now the schedule works. So I try to interact in a different way. If application is supposed to be looked as in portrait mode, I turn it around. If it's supposed to be navigated with mouse clicks, I'm going to try keyboards. Anything can be different. Some people have different behavior. And yes, product studies and empowered teams could research this in advance. But we still develop in only one setting. We have to tendency to behave in a different way. And when we develop in a certain way. So as a tester, I always try something different. OK. I always act during the transition. Whole testing is about states and transition. Initial state of application, transition, and finishing state. You're familiar with it when you are doing unit tests. When you unit test, you set up, you assert, and you see the result. Or you act and you compare the result. You have assertions. So everything is about transition. That's why I always do transition. I click the button, I turn my phone. I click the button and I click another button on the page. I always try to do something in transition because that's where it breaks. State you can verify easily with your test automation. Transitions, it's where manual testing usually happens. Yes, that's why the big heart for state and transitions, it's everything about testing there. I always use more data. Different kind of data. If you test in something like search, you have search output, you know exactly how it's supposed to look like. You even probably thought about the pagination of a result and how it's going to look like. But have you tried to have 100,000 in result? If you have 4 digits in your amount of pages in your pagination, how is it going to look like? How it's going to look like on your different screen size? Those things usually being skipped, at least in my team. And I always focus on something that shouldn't work, or the way it should not work. Because when we create stories, we usually focus on how something's supposed to work, right? We write stories how it's supposed to work. We never think even about that, how it's not going to work, about error messages, how it's going to behave with something gone wrong. If the search shows 0 results, that's usually easy case, but still sometimes being forgotten. Or, I don't know, login failed, the error message, how it's going to look like. So, what I do with this knowledge, how I transfer it to my team. They're not going to test manually and not expect them to do it. It will be just stupid to test it manually, right? So first, I started to pair testing with them during development. Instead of waiting for them to develop, I sat next to my developers and we talked and asked questions. Okay, so you use an integer here, but this is going to be quantity of items in the store. So obviously it cannot be negative, right? So we have to count on this, that it's not going to be negative. We have to think from the product perspective. That's what I did. I sat down with my developers and talked and asked questions together. So instead of finding those pesky bugs in the end, we did it during development. Then we went slightly further. We did some mob testing. We invited people from different specialties. Yes, we had UX in the team who also could join us for mob testing, but we also invited people who not connected to this at all, HRs. We actually had our office manager sitting with us sometimes and asking what it's supposed to mean, how it's supposed to work. And the best of all, customer support, obviously. Involve your customer support if you have a chance. They know exactly how the application is going to be used by real users, not how you intend to be used. And tooling. Because I don't want my developers to do something in the end. I don't want them to test manually. I don't want them to learn all the things I learned in 10 years. Well, back then it was slightly less, but still. There should be tools for them, instead of remembering this, to remind them in advance, probably before they were written a code. And here's something I can highly suggest to you, Bug Magnet. It's an extension for your browser. Right-click on any input, and you will get all the cases for the input that you can test. Some of them will be applicable to what exactly you input doing, some is not. But it's something that will help you actually in advance to know what kind of cases I, as a tester, potentially will be testing. We also created some collections of data. First, I use it for myself. Set of different files, 50 megabyte JPEG file, just to check that we can load JPEG and 50 megabyte or 50 gigabyte on that matter. So different sizes of the, different formats, different types of files. So it's all available, it's always there. Developers at first used it afterwards, but we managed to shift it a bit in advance when we discussed feature. Those things were considered immediately. We used it as a reminder for ourselves what exactly potentially could happen with the app and what limits we should set for downloading files. What else? How exactly, what do I test when I test? Not only how, but what exactly? Usually in a store you have requirements, or historically been, you get requirements, developer develop according to requirements, tester create test cases based on requirements. But the product is so much bigger. Obviously it not contains everything that you should test against, but important things, important about your product is way bigger than requirements, right? But how to find out? As a developer, you usually don't think about it because you have requirements. And if you don't, you have empowered product teams that you can discover. How to discover without having an empowered product team? At least there was not such term back then. So what we started to do? We started to test product, not the code. It took us a while to actually shift mindset, how to test product instead of testing code. We tend to look, okay, we know what we just wrote, what the code's supposed to do. But how the product is supposed to behave. Thinking about product is really, really hard. To help us with this, we involved UX in our discussions, way before we actually develop anything. We involve customer support to tell us the stories, how users avoiding or bugs and using the product anyway. We discussed the feature, how to use the feature beforehand, and we discussed it extensively. Yes, it led to very long meetings, but the whole team was involved and actually invested in this because we were responsible for the product. That's also one thing I forgot to mention. Our product was quite laid back, a product manager, I mean. And his idea of a story was, I want video when you bet on a match to be played for the user who just spent the money to bet on this match. And we could decide how exactly it's supposed to be implemented. All the technologies, but also all the usability, everything as a team, instead of getting requirements. To help us to get through requirements, to identify all the cases, we use mind maps. I'll talk a bit more about mind maps here. Sure, we can use big mind maps for the whole product, but also you can create mind map for one particular feature. Here is an example of mind map for slider that will choose amount of between 0 and 1 million, I think. So you can specify some ideas in here. Why I use mind maps, not checklists, not requirements, not test cases? Because it's way better to make you think. It's better to visualize and also gives you more ideas when you look at the mind map. That's how our brain works. That's why mind maps were useful. And that's how we started to document what we're doing. So we switched from test cases to mind maps completely. And there is another secret. Secret of a good tester. Secret that will help you to find edge cases before you develop. All the test ideas you need. And it's so obvious, right? I literally can Google how to test search and get million results because testers like me have been filling Google with articles about it for years. You can get all this, how to test dropdown, how to test login page. You have this. Use it. Use it before you start developing. Then you don't have to come up with ideas what unit test to write because you already have those ideas written for you in most cases. Sure, there will be cases where you need to think, but that's why you have a group. You have your whole team to support you. So after a year of slowly changing and trying new stuff, working together more and more, where did we end up? We started to prevent majority of bugs. I think it was around 95% less compared to time when I started. I mean in production, obviously. We not consider bugs that under development as bugs at all. We started working together. Almost never we worked alone. As much as possible, we worked as a pair or as a group. Developers did pair programming. We did pair tests and mock tests in discussion session. Almost never we worked alone. We could release very fast with high confidence. To be honest, confidence was that high, my team didn't need me. From person who gives seal of approval to release something, I became obsolete because confidence was that high. Yeah, 95 less bugs in production. And we stopped using test cases at all. So, all the things that I described, they were not testing. It's not testing if you do it in advance. Testing is something that happens in the end, right? It's you're checking against requirements. Well, test automation is still called testing, but it's basically also checks against the requirements. If you don't do something at the end, it's not testing, right? But we managed to create better quality and shorten the feedback loop, right? Because developers knew already in advance what I'm going to test. They didn't have to develop in a way that will be bug. Does this words, better quality and shorten feedback, will remind you of something? Maybe? No? Yep. I think DevOps did the revolution in 2009, right? And now it's our turn as testers, as QAs, whatever call us, to do some kind of revolution that will help you as developers to get faster feedback, shorter and higher confidence in what we're doing. Or not developers per se. I would say teams. We need empowered teams that have high confidence in the quality they release. Sounds radical? Remove all the testers from the team? Well, Google, Test Automation Conference 2011. Keynote speaker announced, test is dead. Why? Because we changed how we develop product. The industry changed, web emerged, we needed faster feedback loops and higher confidence. Modern test principles. I wish I knew it back when I did this project with my team. They're actual written down principles. And look at the last point, 7. People who wrote it, they're testers, and they know that we may become obsolete, and we're okay with it. We actually want it because we want to deliver better quality. We don't want to be those gatekeepers. We want to deliver quality, and if it means that we have to step back and remove ourselves from development teams, that's what we should do. Don't forget Atlassian model. They started a long time ago. I think even before I started working as a QA. And they started practicing this, quality assistance. That's how this word came into the industry. Testers were sitting next to developers, talking about it. And I wish I read about it before I started the project, but I'm also happy that I actually came up with the same conclusion as people who've been doing this for years. At the moment, I'm working at Blockit with an amazing architect who decided that we don't need testers. We're going to remove testers from development teams. And my goal is to make it work. We're going to have a team of testers, or as we call it, quality coaches. So they're not disappearing from the company, they're losing jobs. But what we're going to do is different compared to what they used to do. We are not going to test at all. Yes, I as a QA, I'm not going to test at all, and they're not going to test at all. Our goal is to teach teams how to shift left, how to deliver better quality, and provide them with tools how to do it. Sometimes it's just good tool for test automation. Sometimes it's knowledge how to write better tests when you write your test automation. And it's test automation on different levels, right? And sometimes it's just how to write mind maps, how to think about your requirements, how to be empowered product team. Bringing this quality mindset into discussions instead of doing something at the end. And they're not alone. They're not alone, and we should be there. This change has been going in the industry for more than 10 years now. And we're still sometimes stuck in very old way of thinking. Even inside of agile teams, QA being small waterfall at the end. We need to break this loop. We need our own DevOps revolution. Or QOps revolution. You need to have empowered product teams. You need CI/CD pipeline. You need test automation. What you don't need a tester. And question time. Any questions? Yes? Sorry.
You say you think teams don't need a tester, but do teams need like a testing teacher, like somebody who teaches
Coach.
the mindset, or can they do that on their own?
I think they can do it on their own if, well, they're interested in this. But of course, it's way easier if you have quality coach to help you. That's why you still can do some jobs yourself, but it's good to have DevX team, right, in the company that will help you sometimes to set something up. Same story with quality coaches. I do believe we still need it for now to help you to move forward with this. But yes, you can do it by yourself.
How about those pesky edge cases? How to actually find them when you develop your own application?
Yeah, most time when I hear about edge cases, it's actually they're not quite edge. The Google thing I showed you usually covers those things. That's the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer, when you have those discussions about the product, when you do mind mapping, you'll come up with your edge cases.
Yeah, because it's often a combination of missing pieces of
Yeah.
the requirement, which then is not perhaps developed for that specific case,
Yeah.
and becomes an edge case.
Yeah, but those, okay, there is another thing. Don't forget to launch your code. Yes, you think it's obvious, but apparently it's not. I've seen so many times that developers, okay, I'm done. Code review passed, good, release. But launch your code. It helps. Yeah?
Did you see a change in how you were slicing the features being developed due to those edge cases, saying that, okay, if we're going to support this, and this, it will take for ages. Can we like narrow it down so we're just targeting this one, so we don't need to consider the edge cases?
Yes, and I think it's a theme for another talk because it's so big, how to slice stories. Alex actually briefly touched it, but for better quality, you need to slice story as small as possible, right? Because then it's easier to think it through. But how to actually get there to slicing story, it's really, really hard process because MVP is not about bringing value from product perspective. Sometimes it's about learning. In most cases, it's supposed to be about learning. So part of the edge cases will be found when you have very, very small thing of the product. And you just realize something that's going to happen. And tester most likely won't find it in advance too. He will find it at the end, as well as you as developers team will find it. So it's basically the same time of finding those cases because no one actually could predict it anyway. So there is no value in tester doing it for you. It still will, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for you as a professional tester. What do you think about letting the users do the testing for us?
What kind of testing?
Well, for example, if we deploy, if we're doing web development, we deploy 20, 30, 40 times a day to the production. And then we wait for the user to tell us if we messed up. And then we deploy again, 30 minutes later.
Okay, so I'm not going to say testing is, we're going to problem of definition what testing is. I do believe we have to have lots of checks before that. If something is completely broken, it should be been caught by your test automation. You should have basic pipelines in place to prevent you from releasing a completely broken product. You should have some integration tests and API tests and monitoring. Before user actually report it to customer support or wherever, you should be alerted through your monitoring system that something is wrong. And if after all this, it still went to user, you need to analyze what type of issues you're usually getting from the user. If it's something product related, unusable product, for example, then it's probably how you discuss in stories and how you find out about the product. If it's actual technical stuff, try to find some technical stuff. So I don't think user testing at the end is something that we should rely on, but we definitely can get information out of it and minimize it as much as possible. Yeah?
Have you gotten any pushback from your development teams?
Oh, I could probably write 3 books about it. I think the last one was, I'm confident in the code I write. I just need to check how the product works. Which is true. He probably confident in the piece of code he wrote. There's nothing wrong about this piece of code, but how it fits the rest of the product. That's the problem. And yes, I don't know how to deal with this developer still. But usually, again, I'm usually lucky with people, not with technical stuff. So I usually find a person who understands it. And I usually have easy time convincing others because I have support in the team. But yes, sometimes people just don't want to do it. And you can, yeah, I still haven't found an answer how to deal with it. Yeah?
Let's say we're dealing with a legacy code.
Yeah.
Okay, legacy product, which has been developing still, and there hasn't been any automation test, just manual testing. And how do you keep the balance? Where do you stop? How do you keep the balance of developing the product and developing automation tests? How much time do you spend, sprint-wise?
Everything depends on the team. I truly believe in team's power instead of someone else making decision for the team. How much team wants to be confident in what they're doing? How much time to have from management perspective? If the team is truly empowered, they will find about themselves. But what kind of testing you mean when you test automation? Unit tests, use TDD if you develop something new, right? And sure, you cannot just stop doing stuff and remove testers if you had the process highly dependent on them. But you can create a plan how to do this transition, how to migrate from this old system. It doesn't matter if it's actual system or the process that you've been here for a very long time. You just need to start somewhere. So, I don't know, use TDD for new code, write always unit tests, focus on that for now. Yeah, and when you replace your legacy code, if you do replace it with good code, covered with test automation. If you have time, if you have possibility, start writing test automation for the legacy code that you have. It also will help you to migration when you need to replace it afterwards with new system. So from the investment of time and money perspective, I don't think time spent on test automation is a waste. It's an actual investment. It shortens the time in the long run, and it's going to be way cheaper to deliver something. Did that?
Also, bug reports could be just a way to actually start. If we know that we can recreate that bug right now, then we have a test that actually will cover that case every time in the future if you have the old legacy.
Basically, if you have something that can be written down as test case, it can be automated. That's why I don't write test cases. I'm trying to avoid it. Because if I wrote test case, I could have written test automation for this. Yeah, go ahead.
You said that you brought UX into the discussion. Do you have any practical hands-on tips on how to do that? Where in the process did you learn them?
Okay, when I started, it wasn't so common as now. Now it's very, very common to bring UX into product discovery and the discussions. Back then it wasn't common. But because we were sitting next to each other very close, it was before COVID, so I actually been in one place. I actually sat next to my UX designer when he created new designs. And I don't know what he used. I assume Figma, something that can be downloaded on the phone, so I actually could interact with his design as it's supposed to be. So I could find some issues in advance. That was the first in. And when it started actually working, when we could discuss, okay, if I do this, what's going to happen, ask all those questions about how the product is going to behave, which helped him to create better design, right? But also, after a while, developers who've been hearing it, because we were all close to each other, they started to get involved. It happened just naturally. I don't know how to do it in a team that is remote, and unless you want to set up those kind of meetings.
Could it be an idea that the UX people come up with test cases in advance?
If it's test case, why it's not already there? Why it's not tell it in advance? Why not? I don't know. If you use requirements, acceptance criteria, if you can't come up in advance, if it's your ex who came up with it in advance, just write it down in a story so it can be automated. Don't move it further. As soon as you know something, as soon as you have idea or something, just bring it with the team. So yes, sometimes meetings are boring, but when you actually invest it in something, you work as a team on something, it works, usually. Unless you want to be feature factory. No? No more questions? Okay. We're done.